The murder rate was off the charts. We'll see why in a little bit. But at any rate, just a little bit of trivia for you. It's in what's called the Ring of Fire region. There are actually 20 volcanoes in that little country. It's the smallest country in Central America. And it was the quintessential definition of a banana republic. The Democrats want to turn this into a banana republic.
That's right.
They want to make it to where you don't have rule of law anymore. But look what they're doing to Trump. You know, they just make things up, weaponize the IRS. Who ever thought? Change the Supreme Court when you don't get your way? Yeah. Call it a riot when it's January 6th, but anybody consider they were trying to burn down the courthouse in Portland? Anybody consider those police cars they set on fire? How about people that died trying to get to the hospital while they had the highways blocked? But, we can't do anything about that. Couldn't do anything about Hillary when she took a hammer and crunched her cell phones and the SIM card, destroying evidence. That goes unchecked. Remember Eric Holder in contempt of Congress over Fast and Furious? Did anything ever happen to him? Remember Lois Lerner over the IRS thing? That, she's not going to say anything because she's, she pleaded the fifth, I guess. I can't remember how she put it right now. It was disgusting. She retired, full retirement from the government. That's a banana republic for you, where you have justice for thee, but not for me. And that's what they're trying to turn this into here. You wonder why you're doing what you're doing? I never remember being that bad when I was a kid. Do you? I really don't. But let's go on. They had turned into Banana Republic. Go ahead and advance that for me, please. Now, when I got to El Salvador, I was in a little colony. I'm going to call it a colonia because that's what they called it, a little colony, over on the Pacific coast, real close to the Pacific coast, called El Cocalito, which means essentially the coconut grove. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was going to say. Nothing. I saw people just like you and me, look just like me, people just like my wife, people I care about, living in such abject poverty that it was shocking. Everybody didn't live like this. It wasn't everybody, but it was a shocking amount of people. In the first place, almost nobody had cars. They couldn't afford them. Dirt streets that never got paved and never got fixed either. But this is mild. The houses did not have windows, but they all had grates. They were all surrounded by walls. Some had razor wire. They all had fences. All of them did. But they wouldn't have windows. People would sleep in hammocks. No air conditioning. What's that? No hot water. That wasn't much of an issue. The water was already warm, really warm enough to where, we didn't have hot water where we stayed either, so it wasn't a big deal. But you might go to church with some kids and you meet them on the street. Where have you been? Where are you going? I've been down to the river to wash clothes. They would have running water, but it might be in a faucet outside, and that's the only water they have. They call that a pila. If you look at my YouTube channel, look for Troy Fullerton, I show how pilas are used. They're really pretty cool, actually, but that's where they would, do all of the washing they did at home. Cooking would be done with firewood under what's called a comal, which is like a metal griddle outside. Ladies, there's your range. Biden wants to do away with gas stoves. Well, hey, let's hope he doesn't go to El Salvador and get any ideas here. And that's what they do, is they would just cook. This is how they cooked. And you look at this, and you look at how people are living, and you're thinking, my God, they're just like me. No difference. And this is how they're having to live. The health care was practically non-existent for a lot of them. And I won't get into the healthcare thing because that's another issue. But nothing could have prepared me for the abject poverty. Dirt floors. I was at houses where they just hang blankets up to make walls out of them. Sometimes I saw plastic hung for that reason. No refrigerators, just cooking out with firewood. So just imagine that. Take a look there. This is El Salvador. Go on to the next slide for me, please. But in this situation where everybody is so poor and in such poverty, there were a couple of gangs that actually were formed in the United States. MS-13 and Barrio 18 were formed in the United States in Los Angeles, And then some of those people, supposedly it was to protect Salvadorans in the United States. But these guys got deported, and you know what I said about leftists? It's never enough. When they got down there, they kind of got in cahoots with the corrupt government, and they wound up taking over the country. When you get government corruption involved with the leftists and with what they're doing, just like what we've seen in the United States when the government turned a blind eye to what our street gangs were doing and are doing, follow the money. Somebody's getting some money from all this. Something's going on here, right? And here they were, they slowly but methodically started taking over the country, and these people in poverty had practically no defense. No one was going to help them. They were impoverished, helpless victims. And let me show you how bad it got. Go on, please. The gangs absolutely took over. Utter tyranny. Go on to the next slide, please. Anybody who made any money, even if it was just a little pittance just to survive, the gangs would get a hold of you and charge you what they called rent. So they might go up and say, you've got to pay us X amount of money every week or we'll kill you. And they do that to everybody in town. Any business owners in here? Who's a business owner in here? You're a business. What kind of business do you have, sir?
Cattle company.
Okay, cattle company. Let's say that the government has a cattle company. The government does. Let's say that they do, and they see you as competition. So what they do is they're going to stick the gangs on you, and they're going to really charge you beaucoup bucks because you're making money. You're making money, and this is their way of quelling competition. See? And if a lot of people there receive money from the United States, they call them remesas, which means remittances, that they came from the United States, where their family members would send it down. If they found out you had family sending money back, oh boy, they really wanted their share. I heard about a little old lady. She made her money going door to door selling pupusas, which, if you know what they are, anybody know what pupusas are? A few of you do. Good. They're kind of the Salvadoran version of a taco, okay? They're at any rate, this is just what they're noted for. We have sandwiches in Mexico. They have tacos down there. They have pupusas, right? She would go door to door and sell them for $0.25 a piece, and that's how she made her money. They got a hold of her and told her she had to give them $15 a week. She was like, I can't give you $15 a week. I don't have that. They killed her. Anybody ever pay tithes and offerings at church? Yeah. You know what that is? Okay. People down there don't have any money. The gangs robbed churches. These churches were places where people would pay their tithes in chickens and farm produce. They didn't have any money. Yeah. But the gangs would come and rob those churches. They committed all kinds of horrendous things. I've heard about little girls being raped and then having their bodies cut up and having the pieces of their bodies thrown down a well. I went to church with a woman and her grown son and her daughter-in-law. Where's the father? Well, the father was a mariachi. He made his money playing music for people, going around. He was in Sonsonate, which is a city close by where I was. And so he played music for a gang member. When he asked for money for it, they just killed him. Creating orphans, creating widows in an already impoverished place. It got to the point where you would not be allowed to travel from one little colony to another, even to see family. If they caught you there, they'd kill you. When they wanted kids, they would recruit kids into these gangs. They would just tell them, we're going to kill your mom, we're going to kill your sister, we're going to kill if you don't cooperate. And then they would use them for lookouts, that they put them out and watch, look and see if you see anybody unfamiliar coming into the colony. This is all over El Salvador. This is how bad it got. Did you hear any of this in the news? Any of you know this was going on right there in this little banana republic? I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. All right, so at any rate, meanwhile, the government was complicit in all of this because they used it to control and quell competition. I want you to get a feel for having to live in a hellhole like that for decades. Just imagine. Go on to the next slide, please. So the government gets involved, and they decide that they're going to have a peace accord with them. They call it a tregua in Spanish. A peace accord. They lied and denied doing this. But they did it. The president, who is right now in exile in Nicaragua, was Mauricio Funes. They tried to negotiate a peace accord. Let me tell you the terms of the peace accord. The gangs agreed that they would only murder up to 40 people a day. That's all. And on the government side, they had to take their gang leaders in prison and move them to minimum security prisons where they could have their liquor, have prostitutes in. You getting the picture here? And get what they wanted. So they had to, and discotheques too. If they're in prison, they have to be able to go to the dances. Okay. It's trying to establish peace zones, which are laughable. They were established, the government agreed that they would withdraw all soldiers out of these peace zones. You've heard of defund the police before, haven't you? Yeah. Heard of zones in the United States where the police will not enter? They won't go because after all, it's going to keep the peace. If we defund the police, if we withdraw the police, if we tell the private citizens you can't have guns, you can't protect yourselves, and we actually have areas where the police aren't allowed to enter, boy, that's just going to make everybody safe, isn't it? Do you think it worked in El Salvador? Of course not. It fell to pieces. The government was, now, and here's the thing that you need to understand. I don't mean to offend anybody. I have no idea what your religions are here. But the Archbishop of the Catholic Church was involved in this. So was the Organization of American States and the Minister of Public Safety, David Munguia. They were all involved in trying to put together this truce and lying to the public about it. Do you think your government ever lies to you about stuff? Just maybe? Just saying. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Then President Trump got elected. Excuse me. The President Trump of Central America got elected. Nayib Bukele. Fun name, isn't it? Nayib Bukele. He got elected, and like I said, he was the President Trump of Central America. He's 41 years old. He got elected June 1st, 2019. This is a pretty recent history here. He'd been a mayor in Nuevo Cuscatlán and then San Salvador itself, which is the capital. And he came out and called a spade a spade. He said the gang members were terrorists. That wasn't very politically correct, was it? And he gave them an opportunity to knock it off, but things got worse. He started combating them. Things came to a head one weekend. 62 people were killed by gangs that weekend on March 26th, and then 80 people in the entire weekend, and for him, that was the final straw. So he did what we would call in the United States an emergency declaration. They called a law of exception in El Salvador. He said, that's it, we're bringing in the military, we're suspending the usual rights that people have, and we're going to put a stop to this. Forgive the man if it seems like he was overstepping. He had an emergency on hand. People were getting killed. People were dying. People were living in absolute, utter tyranny. And he was determined to put a stop to it. He didn't defund the police. He didn't tell the military to stay out of it. He did the opposite. Let's see what else he did. Go ahead. First thing he did was he built a big prison. He built a mega prison, and he called it appropriately the Terrorist Confinement Center. It was built between July 2022 and it was finished in January of this year. As of May 12, 2023, 68,579 alleged gang members have been arrested. Wow. Yeah. Get them off the streets. And he didn't stop there. Go ahead and go to this next one. They promised that they were going to make prison life a living hell for the gang members. As far as he was concerned, they had made the whole country a living hell for the entire nation. So, hey, it wasn't going to be a pleasant ride being in prison. The prisoners are dressed in white boxer shorts, no other clothes, nothing to hide. Nothing to hide that way. No contact with the outside world, no TV, no internet, no telephones, no internet. And if you had gang tattoos on you, you're off to prison. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. If you've got a gang tattoo, you must be in the gangs, you're gone. They were getting you off the streets. He had an emergency. Obviously, there's going to come a point in time where we have to actually have prosecutions and bring out the evidence and everything. But hey, For the time being, get them off the streets. You know, back when you had them trying to do a truce, you don't form truces with cockroaches, you exterminate them. And so when he got in there, he realized we got a problem, we got to do something about it. So while he got him in there was still a lot of criminality out on the streets. So in a speech to 1,450 newly trained soldiers, he let them know something. He said, if the criminality on the streets keeps going, the gang members in prison, they're not going to be allowed to eat. It dropped. It dropped. That took care of it. So go ahead and go on to the next slide, then I'm going to go back, okay? I want you to see this. Gang graffiti was outlawed in the country. They actually went around and started destroying gravestones of gang members because they didn't want them turned into shrines like the Nazis did. He went on and he kept going. They founded the International Commission Against Impunity in El Salvador to combat drug trafficking and corruption and white-collar crime, and they established an anti-corruption unit in the National Civil Police to work with them. Sounds good so far, doesn't it? Yes. So I headed in the right direction. What do you think the response was from our leftist government in the United States? Think they approved of all of this? No. I got a question for you. This gets under my skin, and I really have a problem with it. We have a lot of people in the United States that squawked about what Nayib Bukele did. I want to know where they were at when little girls were getting cut up and thrown down wells. Yes. I want to know where they were at when they were getting raped and little old ladies selling pupusas were getting killed. I want to know where they were when you couldn't go from one colony to another to even see family, and they were recruiting little kids saying, we'll kill your mom, we'll kill your dad. Where were our leftist people in the United States government then protesting what was going on in El Salvador? As soon as somebody gets up and does something about it, though, what do we have? Go back to my previous slide, please. Criticism from leftist international community and human rights NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations. The U.S. canceled visas for Salvadoran legislators, called them a threat to democracy. Yeah, Liz Trossel from the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights Office called the measures unnecessary and said they were an excessive use of force. You got the name there. Bukele, like I just did, said, where were these people when all of this was going on? Go on to my next slide, please. The Salvadoran government identified a couple of people as conspiring against Salvadoran democracy at the behest of the U.S. Embassy. They would bribe them, offering them U.S. citizenship if they would comply. Yeah, that's our U.S. government. They accused Bukele of political persecution after corrupt ex-presidents were prosecuted. Let me tell you what happened there. They started going after these people because they come into office with nothing. And here's this one guy that I know. I just know of one guy here. By the time he left office, he had a private helicopter. He had Ferraris. He had 125 vehicles. He had 3 ranches, 4 hotels. Where do you think he got his money? And when they started seeing that it was all corruption, they decided they're going to throw their butts in jail. You know, and so our government has to stick its nose in and say that's a political prosecution. Nayib Bukele said, you're telling us this after what you just did to President Trump?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, good for him. That's right. Go on to my next slide, please. Oh, no, go back. I'm sorry. So, El Salvador established a foreign agents law to prohibit foreign influence, foreign interference in Salvadoran politics, and more power to them because they did. Go on to my next slide. The point I'm making in all of this is while our leftists in the United States are squawking about all of these measures, and you think they'll squawk when we do the same thing?
Of course
they already are.
Yeah.
While they were doing that, what Nayib Bukele did worked.
Yep.
It worked. I could walk the streets of El Cocalito in the dark at night in total safety. We had a little church across from a school. I would walk the dark streets back to the little house where I was staying. Didn't have a thing in the world to worry about. And I'm going to quote Reagan here. I saw the people down there breathing the intoxicating air of human freedom for the first time in decades, for some of them, the first time in their lives. Yeah. People out on the streets, they could travel and go from one city to another. I'd pass people, like I said, they don't have cars, still impoverished, but there's prosperity in the air. This guy that I know from Paul's Valley happened to be down there with me at the same time, and he's from El Salvador. He said, what do you think of my country? I told him I'm shocked by all the poverty. He said, I don't see poverty. He'd grown up there. He said, I see prosperity. I see development. They're seeing possibilities now. What happened? Well, somebody came and got the criminals off the streets. That's what happened. That's what happened. They cracked down. They didn't give them midnight basketball, and they didn't play patty cake with them. They cracked down. All right, let's look here. El Salvador was the most dangerous country in the Western Hemisphere. Now it's the safest. People can travel freely, development's occurring, and it's no longer a banana republic. And let me tell you, up until this point, it's been like this. In the United States, we say to our little kids, so what are you going to be when you grow up? You know what they said in El Salvador? So when are you going to cross into the United States illegally? I've heard Bukele on YouTube talking about how, you know what? That just hurts their country because they have a brain drain. And it hurts the United States because we start relying on the illegal immigrants to come over and provide cheap labor. And so both countries are hurt by it. And he wants to put a stop to it by providing development and providing for the people. You can get a loan in El Salvador to hire a coyote to get you to the United States. You can't get a loan to open a business. Wow. And they're trying to get all of this. Now that they've solved the gang problems, they're trying to get this development, this infrastructure in order, and you can just feel it in the air. You can really sense it. So, that's the results in the streets. Now let's go on. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to play them right now for the sake of time, but I do have a YouTube channel where I put some things up. I showed you. I've got a video. I wish I could show it to you now, but it's a video where I just actually take a tour of one of the streets up to my yard where I actually live down there, and I showed the little house I stayed at and just some things. And if you're interested at all, Troy Fullerton, you can find me on YouTube, and there it'll be, and you can look at that. But at any rate, there they are. There are the links. But let's go on and look here. This is the United States. This is what's been happening these days. Is the answer to defund the police?
No.
Midnight basketball, cashless bail, more welfare programs. Take guns away from you guys to make it safer. It's going to be real safe here if only the criminals have guns, right? The lack of common sense of leftists sometimes is shocking. It's like, do you people think at all? But when do we say enough is enough?
Exactly.
And when do we actually do something about it like they did in El Salvador? These are questions we need to take to the ballot box with us. Go on to the next slide, please. I call this the Bukele phenomenon. When you take criminals off the street, the crime rate goes down. Who'd have thought? Thank you, Sherry.